Hello vinyl community. You know, I collect a lot of Psych records, but to be honest, it's mostly from the UK or from the US. I do have some Psych records from like Sweden, of course, and Germany and the Netherlands and Canada, and so like the typical countries to collect Psych from. But when it comes to like South America or Africa or Asia, my collection has a lot of blank spots, and to be honest, I haven't really explored those continents, what they have. However, I do have some psychedelic records from all around the world. So in this video, I'm gonna take you on a little trip around the world, and I have picked out one psychedelic record from each continent. Of course, except for Antarctica, because, you know, there's no records in Antarctica. But from the other continents, I have picked out one record to see some psychedelic records that were released outside of the traditional like UK or US scenes. So I won't show anything from the UK or the US. And why don't you join in on this little trip and make your own video? It's really easy. You have to pick one Psych record from each continent and show them in a video. So one from Oceania, one from Asia, one from Africa, one from Europe, one from South America, and one from North America. And because that would be really awesome for me to discover more Psych music from different places around the world. So let's start the trip. So I thought it would be great to start at the other side of the world from where I am, in Oceania. So let's start in Oceania and Australia. And I have picked out a really great psychedelic pop album from 1968. This is the band The Twilights with their album Once Upon a Twilight. That came out in this rather plain looking cover. Like this. You can see there. Hear ya. When you look at this cover, it doesn't look like much, but when you open up the gatefold, you will get the full psychedelic artwork inside. And it's very fantasy-like pop-up sleeve like this. Look at this cool inside of the cover here. Really, really cool album cover. So it's like a little scene here. I mean, they did some really cool covers back in the days. And this is, yeah, it's a really cool pop-up art sleeve. I'm gonna fold it down now. A lot of work went into doing this album cover for sure. But when you see it like this, it doesn't look like much, but it's the inside that counts, right? Anyway, the Twilights, they started out like a beat band in Australia and were quite popular and successful. But when psychedelic music became a hit, they jumped on the psychedelic wagon and did this album. And it was released in 1968. But during 1967, they actually went to London to like soak up what was happening there in the psychedelic scene. And since they were a recording artist for EMI, they had the opportunity to sit in when Beatles recorded Penny Lane. So they were in the studio seeing this amazing pop song being created. And they took all these influences from London and from Abbey Road and EMI back to Australia. And they put it all into this wonderful psych pop album. So sound-wise, it's like a post-pepper album filled with all this like studio effects, vocal harmonies, great songwriting, cool trippy effects. Yeah, you name it. It's all in here. It was released in Australia only on these blue-black Columbia labels. This is the mono pressing. They also pressed it in stereo with a different label design. I suspect that is a later pressing because of the label design. Anyway, this is definitely the 1968 mono pressing from Australia. So this was our first destination on our trip around the world with the Twilights.
You thought you'd climb a ladder to the sky. What a silly thing to do. You trained and taught a polar bear to fly. What a silly thing to do. Then you recall how you saved a man. Recall a life of high.
So, from Australia and Oceania, we are traveling north. Up to Asia. And we're gonna land in Kazakhstan in the year 1977. And here we find this pretty awesome album by a band called Dos-Mukasan. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. And here you can see them on the cover, dressed up in their matching suits, looking like a 70s show band or something. But don't judge the book by the cover, you know, and the record by the cover. Because on this album, there's some absolutely monster psych music. And this is a really flimsy, thin cover. This is the first USSR pressing that was released on the Mелодия label in Soviet. So these records are pretty hard to find. And I actually had to order my copy from Kazakhstan. And it was a bit of a gamble, but I finally got it. And I mean, it's not the best condition, but it totally plays okay. Anyway, on this album, there's one absolutely killer, monster, awesome psychedelic track. And it's the opening track called Apartheid-era. And that song is just one of the absolutely greatest psych songs ever. It's a long instrumental psychedelic piece that goes from like atmospheric parts to wild out fuzz guitars, and it has all the ingredients that you want from a killer psychedelic song. The broken fuzz guitars, the cheap organ sounds, like killer plonky bass lines, wild drumming, goes through different moods, and it has the same kind of vibe as Trip Through Hell with CA Quintet has. So it's an absolutely stunner, and I'm gonna put a link down so you can listen to the whole song because it's an absolutely killer. And yeah, one of the best psych songs ever recorded in my opinion. From Kazakhstan, who would have thought of that? When I got this LP, I also picked up from the same seller the second press that came out a few years later, I think, with a different cover. And I bought this because this was in better condition, so I have both the first press and this second press. Anyway, Kazakhstan 1977, killer psychedelic music. Okay, we're gonna leave Kazakhstan and fly south, and we're gonna go on a long trip. All the way to Africa and all the way down to South Africa. And here we find a really obscure and cool LP by a band called Freedom's Children. This is the album with the cool title, Battle Hymn of the Broken-Hearted Horde. That was released in 1968 in this really cool cover, background art. And if we open this gatefold up, there's an awesome psychedelic inside here with UFOs and battlefields and, I don't know, a Buddha statue. And yeah, as you can imagine, there were a large amounts of drugs being taken before they did this album. Freedom's Children, they were a band from Durban in South Africa, and they were actually led by a Scottish-born guy called Ramsey MacKay, who wrote the songs and played bass and did the singing. They started out as like this freak beat kind of band in South Africa, inspired by The Who and bands like that from the UK. And they were famous for playing wild freakouts in South Africa with the stroboscope and like long jams. Anyway, Freedom's Children, they released a couple of singles, and for one reason or another, the band kind of split up. And the two main guys, Ramsey MacKay and another one, they decided to move to London to reform the band there, try to get success in England. However, the record label EMI and Parlophone, they had a contract for a full-length LP by the band. So before they went to London, they went into the studio and recorded like the backing tracks for this album. So not really the finished songs. And also Ramsey laid down some spoken words that they used between the tracks. So this is like a concept album about something. Nobody really knows the story, but it's some kind of concept album with a spoken word between the tracks. Anyway, they left for London and they forgot about this LP. But the record label and the studio, they took these tapes and they finished the record themselves. So they had like in-house engineers and musicians, added instruments and produced the album and released it in this really cool artwork. The band themselves, they were in England, so they didn't know about this record before it came out. They were kind of surprised when they heard the final product. However, it sounds really cool, like a period piece of this 1968 Psych music, but with a very like weird touch to it, with the spoken words and this like quite long spoken words and narrative between songs. But a really cool album and an absolutely wonderful album cover, I must say, and especially the inside here. I just love it. And this is of course not in best condition, an African original, but it still holds up okay for me. It was released on these Parlophone labels. Oh, actually it was 1969 I see here. I thought it was 68, but 69. Anyway, let's listen a little bit to Freedom's Children.
And in the tower of some castle high, wait for the truth while the hours lie. Oh, Aileen, our nights are at hand. Our making love can no longer depend. Listen.
So let's leave Africa and take a long, long trip up north. All the way up to Scandinavia and to Europe. And we're gonna land in Sweden, Stockholm, my hometown. And I'm gonna show you a really cool album from 1968 by a band called International Harvester. And this is their album called Sov Gott, Rosemary. It means like sleep well, Rosemary. And here you can see this kind of hippie collective on the back. This band has had a lot of different names. They started out as Passion Sound in the mid-60s, mainly because the band was led by a guy called Bo Anders Persson, who was a key figure in the Swedish underground scene at that time. And there's a box set of all their recordings. But by 1968, they changed the name to International Harvester. Later on, this band became the more famous band, Träd, Gräs, Stenar, Trees, Grass, Stones, that released a couple of really great jammy psych albums. Anyway, this is 1968 in Sweden, and it's a really experimental psychedelic trip. It's not an easy listening, but it's a really deep experience. This album contains a lot of different moods. It goes from like hard psychedelic almost krautrock kind of grooves, to like atmospheric, folky parts with birds in the backgrounds, to like repetitive drones. And this is a really great example of how experimental the Swedish scene were at the time. They tried to combine like the rock of Rolling Stones with the experimental parts from Terry Riley or something I've heard they said. This album was released by the Finnish label called Love Records with these labels on this really heavy vinyl. Yeah, I should probably do a video about Swedish psych music at some point. I have done a video about Silence Records where I briefly talked about this album. It's not on Silence, but it has connections to Silence Records here in Sweden. But that is something that I will do a little later on. Psychedelic music from Sweden. Anyway, let's listen to a clip from International Harvester. Yeah, let's leave the Northern Hemisphere with Scandinavia and Europe and fly all the way across the Atlantic down to South America and to Peru. And here we find an album from 1970 by a band called Traffic Sound, their self-titled album that looked like this, a laminated cover. And this album was released in this like triple gatefold. You can fold it out like this with a lot of images of the band here. And you put the record in from the side there. Really cool one. And it was released on the Peruvian label called MAG. This is their second album that came out in 1970. And this album has like one foot in the psych world and one foot in the more heavy rock world, I would say. It's like a mix of those two worlds. And they use like saxophone and flutes a lot. And they have a really, really cool sound. They sing in English, so they were definitely influenced by Western rock music. So it's a really solid psych/heavy rock album from Peru. I don't have many records from South America. In fact, this is the only psych record I have from South America. So if you have suggestions, please put it down in the comments with other great music from South America, because I know there are a lot of great bands from there. So, Traffic Sound representing South America from Peru, 1970.
No, I will not go and let you die. Seize all you please and leave yours set. Gently guaranteed to get you high.
So let's leave South America and Peru and travel north to our last destination on this trip. North America. Of course, I won't show anything from the US, and I don't have any records from Mexico in my collection or Central America, so I have to go with something from Canada. And everyone knows that Canada did some absolutely amazing psych music as well. And we're going to go to Toronto to this band called Kensington Market and their last LP called Aardvark that was released in this cover with an Aardvark, yeah. Nice illustrations. Released in a gatefold cover. This was released on Warner Bros. This is like a white label promo that I have here from 1969. And this album It's not a hard album to find, but it's a really great one in my opinion. It's like filled with this late 60s McCartney types pop music and many different genres as well. Some of the songs really, to my ears, sounds very much like it could be from Canterbury band like Caravan or Soft Machine or so, with the vocal harmonies. And they use a lot of studio effects and great songwriting and great singing. There are also some early progressive elements in this music. I mean, it's almost like a transition between psychedelic pop and art rock or something. So it's in that world. And they came from Toronto, and Toronto had a great psych scene, but this is the last LP they did, and they quit after this LP. They had released some albums before this that I haven't checked out. I only have this Aardvark LP. That is our representative from North America. I would have loved to have something from Mexico here, because I know that Mexico has a really great psych scene as well. Of course, we know about Kaleidoscope, the Mexican Kaleidoscope, and other bands. And I know that Vinyl Piper has done some digging in Mexico and found some really cool psych albums. So if you have recommendations for Mexican psych albums, please put it down in the comments as well. But now we're in Canada, and Canada has to represent North America in this video for me with this LP Aardvark by Kensington Market.
New things to remember. And I will sing, and I will sing. Said I could be happy. Said I could be happy. She's all.
So that was my little trip around the world, where I showed one psychedelic records from each continent, except Antarctica. So why don't you join this thread? It's easy, just pick one album from each continent and put it into a video. Maybe you don't want to show psychedelic music, maybe you would prefer something else. But let's go on a trip around the world and see different places than, let's say, UK and US. So thank you for tuning in to this little trip. Please put down comments with your recommendations from non-US and non-UK psych music from around the world. I know there's a lot for me to discover. And subscribe if you want to do that. I always appreciate that. So take care out there, buy records, and be kind to each other. Peace out.